When most people imagine the end of the world, they imagine movement. They imagine cities shaking. They imagine sirens in the distance. They imagine fire in the sky, crowds in the streets, the sound of something collapsing, the feeling that the world as they know it is breaking apart all at once. In the human mind, endings are usually loud. They arrive with noise, with panic, with heat, with speed. But there is another kind of ending. A quieter one, a slower one. A kind of ending that does not announce itself with flames or thunder, but with stillness. A place so silent, so empty, and so far removed from ordinary human life that standing there would not feel like arriving somewhere new. It would feel like arriving after everything else had already gone. After the voices had faded. After the roads had disappeared. After the weather of ordinary places had been replaced by something older, colder and more patient. That place is Antarctica. At first glance, Antarctica hardly looks real. It does not resemble the landscapes most of us carry in our minds when we think about the Earth. There are no crowded forests there. No cities, no villages. No power lines stretched across the horizon. No warm rivers winding through valleys. No farms, no traffic. No signs of everyday life. Instead, there is white. White stretching outward so far that the eye begins to lose its sense of scale. White in every direction. White on the ground. White in the distance. White gathered into ridges, plains, shelves, cliffs, and storms. White so complete that it begins to feel less like a color and more like an atmosphere. And above that, white. There is often a sky so clear, so sharp, and so severe that it seems almost detached from the rest of the planet. Antarctica does not merely look cold. It looks separate. It looks like a place that exists outside the rhythm of the human world. A continent at the bottom of the earth. Cut off by ocean, isolated by current, preserved by temperature, and wrapped in so much ice that the land beneath it has almost vanished from memory. To most people, Antarctica appears empty. A frozen blank space on the map. A distant wilderness. A place of snow, wind, and little else. But that impression is misleading. Because Antarctica is not empty. Everything about it invites a certain misunderstanding. Its silence makes it seem motionless. Its whiteness makes it seem simple. Its remoteness makes it seem irrelevant. Its cold makes it seem dead. But none of that is really true. The silence is real, but it covers movement. The whiteness is real, but it covers complexity. The cold is real, but it covers heat. And the emptiness is only an illusion created by the fact that so much of Antarctica is concealed beneath its own surface. Under that vast shield of ice, there are landscapes no human eye has ever directly seen. There are mountain ranges buried under kilometers of frozen weight. There are lakes that have remained sealed in darkness for immense stretches of time. There are rivers of water moving under the ice itself. There are volcanic systems still warm beneath one of the coldest places on Earth. There are preserved records of ancient climates, ancient atmospheres, and perhaps traces of worlds that vanished long before human beings arrived. Antarctica is not simply a continent of ice. It is a continent of layers. A layer of weather over a layer of frozen water. A layer of frozen water over a layer of stone. A layer of stone over a deeper layer of heat. And within those layers, a memory of Earth so old and so detailed that modern science still treats the continent less like a place that has been fully understood and more like a sealed archive that has only just begun to open. And yet even that description is incomplete. Because Antarctica is not just a record of the past. It may also be a map of the future. What happens there does not stay there. The ice of Antarctica is so immense and so deeply tied to the balance of the planet that even small shifts in its behavior can echo across oceans, coastlines, weather systems, and centuries. To study Antarctica is to study stillness, but it is also to study pressure. Weight, time, memory, fragility, and change so slow that it almost escapes notice until suddenly it no longer does. That is part of what makes the continent so mesmerizing. It feels permanent. If you were standing on the high Antarctic plateau, with nothing around you but distance and light and cold, you might easily believe you were standing on the most stable surface on Earth. A place beyond history. A place beyond noise. A place beyond urgency. But permanence in Antarctica is one of the greatest illusions of all. Because the ice moves. It moves slowly, yes. So slowly that from one moment to the next, it appears perfectly still. But over time, it flows, it bends, it cracks, it presses downward, it slides outward. It carries air from ancient worlds in tiny trapped bubbles. It stores dust from volcanoes that erupted before civilization existed. It seals off water, rock, microbes, and entire buried landscapes from the rest of the biosphere. The Antarctic ice sheet is not a static lid placed on top of the continent. It is an active system. A system shaped by snowfall, pressure, ocean currents, temperature gradients, gravity, geothermal heat, and geological time. And that system, for all its size, may be far more delicate than human beings once believed. We are going to move slowly through that hidden world. Not with urgency, not with panic. Not as if we are racing toward a conclusion. We are going to look at Antarctica not as a blank white edge of the map, but as one of the most intricate and mysterious places on Earth. We will look beneath the surface ice and into the unseen geography below. Subglacial lakes and volcanic heat hidden under frozen weight. We will look backward into ages when Antarctica was green and alive with forests. And we will look at the quiet changes unfolding now. Changes that reveal just how much of the modern world depends on the stability of this distant and silent continent. But before any of that, it helps to do something simple. To let go for a moment of the usual speed of thought. Because Antarctica is not a place that reveals itself quickly. It is a place that asks for patience. The continent does not impress the mind by throwing details at it all at once. It works differently. It reveals itself the way deep water reveals depth, or the night sky reveals distance, gradually, silently by scale. So as you listen, there is no need to hold everything in your mind at once. You do not need to memorize names. You do not need to organize every fact. You do not need to force the landscape into a neat picture. You only need to drift, to follow the ice southward, past the familiar world of roads and buildings and crowded coastlines, past the storm tracks of the Southern Ocean, past the last inhabited margins of the map, toward a place where the air grows sharper, the land disappears under white, and the earth begins to feel older than usual. A place where silence is not an absence, but a presence. A place where the wind can travel over snow and ice for unimaginable distances. A place where mountains stand in darkness under frozen weight. A place where water sleeps under kilometers of pressure. A place where the past has not vanished, only been stored. This is Antarctica. And to understand what lies beneath it, we first have to understand the surface illusion that hides everything else, the ice. The ice itself. If Antarctica appears quiet from a distance, it is because the ice hides everything that would normally give a place its sense of life. Movement, sound, texture, variation. The ice smooths it all. It covers the roughness of the land. It softens the shapes of mountains. It fills valleys. It stretches across entire regions without interruption. And because of that, it creates the illusion of simplicity. A single surface, a single color, a single unmoving layer. But in reality, the ice of Antarctica is not simple at all. Not just in area, but in depth. If you were able to take a cross-section of the continent, you would see something difficult to fully grasp at first. In many places, the ice is more than 2 kilometers thick. In others, it reaches down 4, sometimes even close to 5 kilometers. That is not just a covering. A weight so vast that it changes the shape of the earth beneath it. Over millions of years, snowfall has accumulated here without fully melting away. A thin layer of snow settles onto the surface. At first, it is light, soft, almost weightless, but time changes it. The layers below are slowly compressed. The air between the snow crystals is squeezed out. The structure becomes denser, harder, colder. Snow becomes fern, fern becomes ice, and the deeper you go, the older it becomes. What looks like a single surface from above is actually a vertical timeline, a slow accumulation of winters stacked on top of one another. Year after year, century after century, millennium after millennium. The ice sheet we see today is the result of that process repeating itself over tens of millions of years. And with each new layer, the weight increases, pressing downward, relentless, constant. In fact, that the land beneath Antarctica has not remained unchanged. It has been pushed, lowered, bent under pressure. The sheer mass of the ice has forced parts of the continent downward into the Earth's mantle, as if the surface itself is quietly yielding under the burden above it. If all the ice were to disappear instantly, the land would not remain where it is now. It would begin very slowly to rise again. Not over years, not even over centuries, but over thousands of years as the Earth gradually rebalances itself. A slow recovery from a weight that has been building for ages. But despite all of this pressure, all of this depth, all of this time, the most surprising thing about Antarctic ice is not how heavy it is how it behaves. Because it is not truly still. At human scale, it appears motionless. You could stand on it, look out in every direction, and feel as though nothing has changed for an eternity. No visible motion, no shifting ground. No sign that anything is happening beneath your feet. But that stillness is deceptive. Because the ice is moving. Slowly, quietly, continuously. Not like a river you can see. Not like water flowing around rocks. But like something thicker. Something heavier. A movement so gradual that it becomes almost invisible to the human eye. Yet over time, it reshapes the continent. The ice sheet flows outward from the high interior of Antarctica toward the coasts. Pulled by gravity, guided by the shape of the land beneath it. Sliding, stretching, compressing, sometimes only a few meters per year. Sometimes faster, but always moving. And at the very bottom of this vast frozen mass, something unexpected happens. Where the ice meets the ground, conditions begin to change. The pressure is immense. So immense that it alters the behavior of water itself. Under normal conditions, water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. But under extreme pressure, that point shifts. It becomes easier for ice to melt, even in temperatures that would normally keep everything frozen solid. So at the base of the Antarctic ice sheet, in certain regions, a thin layer of liquid water forms. Not a lake, not a flowing river, but a boundary. A nearly invisible film of water caught between the ice above and the rock below. And on that thin, hidden layer, the entire ice sheet rests. Not fixed in place, but sliding. Slowly, silently, almost frictionless. This changes everything. Because instead of being anchored solidly to the land, the ice becomes something more dynamic, more responsive to changes in temperature, pressure, and ocean conditions. It means that Antarctica is not simply a frozen continent. It is a system in motion, a system that stores time, but also moves through it. And as we begin to look deeper, beyond the ice itself, we start to see just how much has been hidden there. Because beneath this immense, slow-moving weight, there are entire worlds that have remained untouched for longer than human history can easily comprehend. And those worlds are not made of ice at all. Hidden water beneath the ice. If you imagine the world beneath Antarctica, it is natural to picture something cold, solid, and still. A silent layer of rock pressed under the weight of ice. Something empty, something frozen. Something unchanged. But that picture is not entirely accurate. Because deep beneath the ice, there is water. Not frozen, but liquid. Hidden far below the surface, sealed away in complete darkness. It is a quiet contradiction. One of the coldest places on Earth, hiding water that is not frozen. And not just small pockets. There are entire lakes beneath Antarctica, hundreds of them, scattered across the continent, connected in ways we are only beginning to understand. Each one sealed beneath layers of ice so thick that no sunlight has reached them for immense stretches of time. If you could descend through the ice, slowly, passing through layer after layer, you would leave behind everything familiar. The wind would disappear. The light would fade. The temperature would stabilize into something constant and still. And eventually, you would reach water. One of the most well-known of these hidden lakes is called Lake Vostok. It lies buried beneath more than 4 kilometers of ice in one of the most remote regions of the continent. From above, there's nothing to see. Only a flat, endless white surface. No sign of what exists below. No hint that beneath that stillness, there is something vast. Lake Vostok is enormous. Not a small underground reservoir, but a body of water comparable in size to some of the largest lakes on Earth. And it has been isolated for millions of years. Completely sealed off from the atmosphere. Completely cut off from sunlight. Completely removed from the changing surface world. Inside that space, there is no day. No night, no seasons, only darkness. Unchanging darkness that has persisted for longer than human civilization has existed. And yet, the water does not freeze. It remains in a delicate balance. Above it, the immense weight of the ice presses downward. Below it, a faint geothermal warmth rises slowly from deep within the earth. Not enough to heat the water in any noticeable way, but just enough to keep it from turning solid. A quiet equilibrium. Pressure and heat holding the lake in a suspended state. Over time, this isolation has changed the nature of the water itself. As the ice sheet slowly moves above the lake, the lowest layers of ice begin to melt. And within that ice, there are tiny bubbles of ancient air. Air that was trapped thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of years ago. When the ice melts, those gases are released into the lake. But they cannot escape. There is nowhere for them to go. So they dissolve, building up slowly over time, creating a chemical environment unlike anything at the surface. Dense, pressurized, rich in dissolved gases, a place where the rules are slightly different. And in that environment, something else begins to appear. Not in the way we usually imagine it. Not visible movement. Not complex ecosystems spreading across open space. But something quieter. Microscopic organisms. Simple forms of life, adapted to darkness, pressure, to isolation. In samples taken from ice just above the lake, scientists have found traces of this life. Fragments of DNA. Signs that even in this sealed world, something has endured. Existing in a state that feels almost suspended between activity and stillness. Some of these organisms appear to rely not on sunlight, but on chemical energy, drawing from minerals, from the environment itself. A way of living that does not depend on the surface at all. And this raises a quiet, almost unsettling thought. If life can exist here, in complete darkness, under immense pressure, sealed away for millions of years, then perhaps it can exist in places far beyond Earth as well. Beneath the icy surfaces of distant moons, under frozen oceans hidden from their stars. In that sense, these Antarctic lakes are not just part of our planet. They are something like a window. A small, silent glimpse into what life might look like in the most isolated corners of the universe. And yet, for all that we have learned, these lakes remain largely untouched. We have not fully entered them. We have not seen them directly. We have not explored them in the way we explore oceans or continents. They remain sealed, protected by the very ice that hides them, a hidden system of water flowing slowly beneath the frozen surface, unseen, undisturbed, and almost completely unknown. The hidden mountains beneath the ice. If all the ice covering Antarctica were to slowly fade away, not suddenly, but gently, as if it had never existed, what would be revealed would not be a flat, empty plain. It would not be smooth. It would not be simple. Instead, the land beneath would rise into something far more complex. A landscape shaped long before the ice arrived. A landscape that still exists, unchanged, hidden in complete darkness. Because beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, there are mountains. Not small ones, not isolated peaks, but entire mountain ranges stretching across vast distances, buried so deeply that no human eye has ever seen them directly. In the center of East Antarctica, far from the coasts, far from any visible terrain, there's a range known as the Gamburtsev Mountains. They were not discovered by sight. No one climbed them. No one mapped them by walking their ridges. Instead, they were found indirectly. Scientists sent waves of energy down through the ice and listened to the echoes returning from below. And what those echoes revealed was unexpected. A full mountain range, sharp, jagged, rising thousands of meters upward from beneath the ice. A landscape that resembles something like the Alps, with steep ridges, deep valleys, and complex structures carved long ago. What makes these mountains so unusual is not just their size, but their condition. They are preserved. In most parts of the world, mountains are constantly changing. Wind wears them down. Rain erodes their surfaces. Glaciers grind them slowly, turning sharp edges into smoother forms. Over long periods of time, they lose their definition. They soften, they fade. But here, that process was interrupted. When the Antarctic ice sheet formed, it did not simply cover the land, like a layer of glass placed over a detailed surface, protecting it from erosion, from weather, from time itself. so the mountains remained. Frozen in their original form. Not changing, not wearing away, not collapsing. Simply existing in complete stillness and complete darkness. For tens of millions of years, if you could somehow stand on one of those buried peaks, you would not see the sky. You would not feel the wind. Above you, there would be kilometers of ice, heavy ceiling pressing downward. Below you, rock shaped in a time when the world was very different. And all around you, nothing but darkness. No sound, no movement, no sense of the outside world. Distant pressure of the ice above, and the quiet presence of a landscape that has not been touched for longer than human history can easily comprehend. The Gamburtsev Mountains are only one example. Across Antarctica, there are valleys, ridges, basins, and entire hidden terrains, all buried beneath the ice. A version of the continent that exists in parallel with the one we see. Above, a smooth white surface. Below, a rugged, complex world. Two realities separated by kilometers of frozen water. And this hidden geography is not just a curiosity. It shapes everything. The way the ice flows. The way water moves beneath it. The way pressure builds and releases. The mountains guide the ice, even though they are never seen. They act as anchors, barriers, pathways, quietly influencing the movement of the entire continent. It is a reminder that what we see on the surface is only a fraction of what is truly there. That even in a place that appears simple, there can be layers of complexity hidden just out of sight. And as we continue to move deeper into Antarctica, we begin to encounter something else beneath the ice. Not just cold and not just stone, but heat. Slow, persistent, and unexpected. Fire beneath the ice. When we think of Antarctica, we imagine cold. Endless cold, still air, frozen ground. A place where nothing warm could exist. And yet, beneath the ice, and sometimes even rising above it, there is heat. Not dramatic, not explosive in the way we usually imagine, but steady. Persistent, always present. Deep within the earth, heat is never far away. And in Antarctica, that heat finds its way upward. One of the clearest signs of this can be seen on Ross Island. Rising out of the frozen landscape is a mountain unlike the others. Mount Erebus. From a distance, it appears calm. A solitary peak covered in snow and ice, standing quietly against the polar sky. But at its summit, something unusual is happening. Inside its crater, there's a pool of molten rock, a lava lake. Not something that appears briefly and disappears, but something that remains. Slowly moving, gently circulating. A constant presence of liquid heat in one of the coldest environments on Earth. The temperature difference is difficult to imagine. Outside, the air can fall far below freezing. Cold enough to numb the skin within minutes. But inside the crater, the lava glows at temperatures close to 1,000 degrees. A quiet contrast, fire surrounded by ice. And yet, this is not a violent place. The activity of Erebus is steady, measured, almost rhythmic. The lava rises, releases gas, settles again, over and over. Not erupting in sudden bursts, but existing in a continuous state of motion. As if the earth itself is breathing slowly beneath the surface. But the most interesting part of this heat is not only at the summit. It spreads outward, through the rock, through the ice, quietly warming the areas around it. And where that warmth meets the ice, something unexpected begins to form. Cavities, spaces, hidden chambers carved from within. Inside these spaces, the environment changes, the temperature rises. The air becomes softer, more humid, filled with a gentle mist. The walls, made of blue ice, glow faintly with filtered light from above. The ground, sometimes bare rock, sometimes soft volcanic material. A hidden interior world, protected from the harsh conditions outside. If you were to step into one of these spaces, you might forget where you are. Outside, one of the coldest places on Earth. Inside, a quiet, enclosed environment where the temperature can feel almost mild. A place shaped not by the cold, but by the slow release of heat. And in environments like this, something else becomes possible. Life. Not widespread, not obvious, but present. Small organisms, adapted to these conditions, finding a way to exist in the warmth beneath the ice. And Mount Erebus is only one visible example, because across West Antarctica, there are many more. Hidden beneath kilometers of ice, there are volcanic systems, some active, some dormant, forming one of the largest volcanic regions on Earth. Most of them remain unseen, buried, silent, compressed under immense weight, but they are still there. And their presence matters. Because heat, even when subtle, changes the behavior of ice. It softens it, it weakens it, it creates layers of water beneath it. And that, in turn, affects how the entire ice sheet moves. The ice above is not isolated from the earth below. It responds to it. Slowly, continuously, a quiet interaction between cold and heat. Surface and depth, stillness and motion. And as we move further through this hidden system, we begin to see that Antarctica is not just a place of extremes, but a place of balance. A balance that has existed for a very long time, and one that is now beginning to shift. Life in the cold and the dark. When we think about life, we usually imagine movement. Animals walking, birds flying, plants growing toward the light. Life in our minds is often tied to warmth, to sunlight, to activity. It feels natural to assume that where there is extreme cold and complete darkness, there would be nothing. But Antarctica quietly challenges that idea. Because even here, life exists. Not in the way we are used to seeing it, not in large numbers. Not in visible abundance, but in small, subtle, persistent forms. Beneath the ice, inside hidden lakes, within pockets of warmth created by volcanic heat, there are organisms. Simple, yet remarkably adapted. They do not rely on sunlight. They do not depend on the rhythms of day and night. Instead, they live differently, slowly. Drawing energy from minerals, from chemical reactions, from the environment itself. A form of life that is not built around speed, but around endurance. In some of the hidden ice caves formed near volcanic regions, scientists have found traces of moss, algae, and tiny invertebrates. Living in isolated conditions. Protected from the harsh winds above, surrounded by warmth in an otherwise frozen world. These environments are quiet, stable, almost unchanged over long periods of time. And because of that, life there evolves differently. Not through competition and rapid change, but through patience. Through adaptation to stillness. Some of the genetic signatures found in these places do not fully match known species, which suggests something interesting. That isolation over long enough periods of time can create entirely new forms of life. Not dramatic, not complex in the way large ecosystems are, but unique. Shaped by conditions that exist almost nowhere else. And this leads to a broader realization. Life does not require ideal conditions. It does not wait for comfort. It does not depend on what we consider normal. It finds a way even in the most unlikely places, even under pressure. Even in darkness, even in cold, and often it does so quietly. Without drawing attention. without changing the landscape in obvious ways, simply existing over long stretches of time, adapting, enduring, continuing. In Antarctica, life is not loud. It does not dominate the environment. It does not reshape the land in visible ways. Instead, it fits into the spaces available, into warmth where it exists, into water where it remains liquid, into rock, into ice, into hidden systems beneath the surface. And in doing so, it becomes part of the larger balance, a quiet presence within a much larger, slower system. And as we begin to understand that, the continent starts to feel different. Not empty, but restrained. Not lifeless, but subtle. A place where life exists, just below the level of immediate perception. And where the absence of noise does not mean the absence of activity. It simply means that everything is happening more slowly. The ice is memory. If you were to stand on the surface of Antarctica and look out across the endless white, it might feel like you are looking at something simple. A frozen landscape, a place shaped only by cold. But beneath that surface, there is something far more intricate. Because the ice of Antarctica is not just frozen water. It is a record, a memory, layered slowly over time. Every snowfall that has ever settled on this continent has left a trace. At first, it arrives lightly. A thin dusting of snow, barely noticeable, but it does not disappear. It stays, and over time, more snow falls above it. Layer after layer, year after year, each one pressing down on the one before it. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the weight increases. The lower layers become compressed, denser, more compact, until eventually they transform into ice. And within that ice, something is preserved, tiny pockets of air, trapped between the crystals as the snow becomes solid, sealed off from the outside world. Each of these pockets is a fragment of the atmosphere from the exact moment it was formed. A small sample of the air from years, from centuries, from ages long past. And because the ice builds upward over time, these pockets form a timeline. The deeper you go, the older the air becomes. What appears from above as a single continuous surface is actually a vertical archive, a slow stacking of moments. Layer upon layer, each one holding a quiet record of the world as it once was. If you could descend through the ice, moving carefully from the surface down into the deeper layers, you would be moving backward through time. The upper layers, relatively recent. The deeper ones, older than recorded history. And far below, air that existed long before human beings. Scientists have learned how to access this record. By drilling deep into the ice, sometimes several kilometers down, they retrieve long cylindrical cores. Columns of ice that contain thousands of years of history within them. When these cores are brought to the surface and carefully analyzed, something remarkable happens. As the ice is gently melted in controlled conditions, the trapped air is released. Tiny bubbles escaping from their frozen state, making faint sounds as if the past itself is quietly exhaling. And within that air, there is information. The composition of the atmosphere, the concentration of gases, the presence of volcanic dust, particles carried by winds that blew across the earth long ago. All of it preserved. Not in fragments of stone, not in written records, but in the ice itself. Through this process, scientists have been able to reconstruct the climate of the Earth far beyond the limits of human memory. Hundreds of thousands of years into the past, they can see when temperatures rose and when they fell. They can trace periods of stability and moments of sudden change. They can measure how the atmosphere shifted long before any instruments existed to observe it. In this way, Antarctica becomes something more than a place. It becomes an archive. Frozen library, where the pages are made of ice and the text is written in air, dust, and time. And unlike many other records, this one has remained almost untouched. Protected by cold, preserved by isolation. A continuous account of the planet's past held in perfect stillness. But there is something fragile about this memory. Because once the ice is disturbed, once it melts, that record begins to disappear. The air escapes, the layers collapse, the structure dissolves. What was once carefully preserved becomes part of the present again, indistinguishable from everything around it. And so, the ice holds more than just water, it holds context. A way of understanding how the Earth has changed over time. A reference point against which everything else can be measured. And without it, that perspective becomes harder to maintain. Because memory, once lost, is not easily restored. Antarctica does not simply store the past, it protects it. Quietly, without interruption, for as long as the conditions allow. And as we continue to move through this landscape, we begin to see that what lies beneath the ice is not only physical, but temporal. A connection to a world that existed long before us. Quiet anomalies of the ice. As we spend more time with Antarctica, it begins to feel less like a single landscape and more like a collection of quiet anomalies. Small details, unexpected patterns, subtle phenomena that don't immediately fit into our usual understanding of how the world works. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, but enough to make the continent feel slightly unfamiliar. One of these places lies in a region known as the McMurdo Dry Valleys. Unlike most of Antarctica, this area is not covered in thick ice. It is one of the driest places on Earth. A landscape of exposed rock, frozen ground, and almost no precipitation. At first glance, it feels even more empty than the rest of the continent. But within that stillness, there is something unusual. From the edge of a glacier, a dark red liquid slowly flows downward, staining the ice beneath it, spreading across the surface in thin streams. The color stands out immediately. Deep, almost rust-like, contrasting sharply with the pale surroundings. This place is often referred to as Blood Falls. But despite the name, there is nothing violent about it. The movement is slow, continuous, almost calm. The source of this color is not what it appears to be at first. It is not biological in the way one might expect. Instead, it begins beneath the glacier. Far below the surface, there is a pocket of extremely salty water. So dense and so rich in minerals that it remains liquid even at temperatures well below freezing. Over time, this water has been isolated, cut off from the outside environment, stored in darkness under pressure for thousands of years. As the glacier above it slowly shifts, small pathways open. And through those pathways, the water finds its way to the surface. When it finally emerges, something changes. For the first time in a very long time, it comes into contact with the air. And in that moment, a reaction occurs. The iron within the water oxidizes, turning from a clear or pale tone into a deep red. The color spreads, slowly staining the ice below. Not as a sudden event, but as a quiet, ongoing process. A subtle interaction between what has been hidden and what exists at the surface. And within that water, there is something else, life. Microorganisms adapted to conditions that are extremely cold, highly saline, and completely dark. They do not rely on oxygen. Instead, they draw energy from chemical reactions involving iron and sulfur. A different way of existing, a slower, more contained form of life. One that does not depend on sunlight or warmth or the usual cycles we associate with living systems. It is another reminder that even in isolation, even in extreme environments, life finds a way to continue. Not loudly, not visibly, but persistently. And Antarctica offers other quiet surprises as well. Across the surface of the ice, scattered in certain regions, there are small, dark objects. At first, they appear out of place. Simple stones resting on a white background. But many of them did not originate here. They fell from space. Fragments of asteroids, pieces of distant worlds that have traveled across vast distances before arriving on Earth. In most environments, these objects are difficult to find. They become hidden among other rocks, lost in forests or submerged in oceans. But in Antarctica, they remain visible. The contrast is clear. Dark stone against white ice. And over time, the movement of the ice itself helps to gather them, slowly carrying them, concentrating them in certain areas where they can be found more easily. So in this quiet, frozen place, it becomes possible to hold something that did not originate on Earth. A fragment of another environment resting silently on the surface of this one. It adds another layer to the sense that Antarctica is not just isolated in space, but connected to much larger systems. Geological, planetary, even cosmic. And yet, despite all of these unusual details, nothing here feels chaotic. Nothing feels overwhelming. Each phenomenon unfolds slowly. Each process takes its time. Whether it is water moving beneath ice, or minerals reacting with air, or fragments of space settling quietly onto the surface, everything happens at a pace that encourages observation rather than urgency. Antarctica does not rush, and as a result, even its most unusual features feel calm, contained. Part of a larger stillness that defines the entire continent. When Antarctica was green, it is difficult to imagine standing in a place so cold, so quiet, so completely covered in ice that it was once something entirely different. Because Antarctica has not always looked like this. There was a time long before the ice when this continent was green. Not partially, not in small regions, but almost entirely. Covered in forests, filled with rivers, alive with movement and sound. If you could travel far back in time, tens of millions of years into the past, you would not recognize it. The white surface would be gone. In its place, there would be land. Dark soil, flowing water, vegetation stretching outward across the landscape. The air would feel different, warmer, heavier, filled with moisture. Instead of wind moving across ice, there would be the quiet movement of leaves. Instead of empty space, there would be layers of life. Forests growing across valleys, plants covering the ground, ecosystems slowly developing over time. At that time, Antarctica was not isolated in the way it is now. It was part of a much larger landmass, connected to what we now know as South America, Australia, and other southern regions of the planet. A single vast system, and the global climate was different. Warmer overall, more stable in temperature. There were no large ice sheets at the poles, no permanent frozen caps. Instead, the planet existed in what is often described as a greenhouse state, where warmth extended much further than it does today, even at the poles. But living in Antarctica at that time still required adaptation. Because even in a warmer world, the position of the continent remained the same. Near the pole, and that meant something unusual. Long periods of daylight followed by long periods of darkness. Months where the sun would not set, and months where it would not rise. a rhythm very different from the one most ecosystems experience. And yet, life adapted to it. The forests that grew here developed their own patterns. During the extended daylight of the summer, growth would accelerate. Plants would absorb as much energy as possible, expanding quickly, making use of the constant light. And during the long winter darkness, they would slow down, entering a state of dormancy, conserving energy, waiting until the light returned again. A cycle of activity and stillness, not unlike the patterns we have already seen in other parts of Antarctica. Even today, and evidence of this past still remains, hidden but preserved. In certain regions of the continent where rock is exposed, scientists have found fossils, leaves, roots, fragments of ancient plants, not carried there by water, not transported from somewhere else, but preserved exactly where they once grew. Which tells us something important. That these forests were not temporary. They were established, stable. Part of the landscape, not an exception, but the norm. And in some cases, the fossils are detailed enough to reveal how these plants lived, how they adapted, how they responded to their environment. A quiet record of a very different Antarctica. There was even a period when conditions became warmer still, a time when global temperatures rose significantly. And during that time, parts of Antarctica may have resembled something closer to a temperate or even subtropical environment. Not entirely unlike regions that today feel warm and humid, with plant life that would seem completely out of place in the modern polar landscape. This contrast is difficult to fully absorb. The same place that now exists in deep cold, once supporting forests, water systems, and continuous biological activity. But over time, the conditions began to change. Slowly, gradually, the global climate shifted, temperatures declined. Ocean currents reorganized, the continent became more isolated. And as that happened, the cooling intensified, ice began to form. At first, in smaller regions, then expanding. Growing thicker, spreading outward, until eventually, the landscape we see today began to take shape. The forests disappeared, the rivers froze, the soil was buried, and the entire continent transitioned from green to white. Not suddenly, not all at once, but through a long, quiet transformation. A shift from one state to another. And that transition still echoes today. Because beneath the ice, the older world remains. The mountains that once stood exposed still exist. The valleys that once carried water are still there. The remnants of ancient ecosystems still preserved in rock. Antarctica did not lose its past, it covered it. And in doing so, it became something unique. A place where two worlds exist at once, one visible and one hidden. One defined by cold and one remembered through warmth. And as we continue forward, we begin to see that this balance between past and present, between stability and change, is not fixed. It is shifting, slowly but steadily. Slow changes in the ice. For a very long time, Antarctica existed in a kind of balance. Not perfectly still, but stable. Snow would fall, ice would form. Glaciers would move slowly toward the ocean, and pieces would eventually break away. But over time, these processes remained in equilibrium. What was added was roughly equal to what was lost. A slow cycle. Predictable, consistent. The continent, in its own quiet way, was steady. And because these changes happened over such long periods of time, they felt almost invisible. Too gradual to notice, too slow to feel. But in recent decades, something has shifted, not suddenly. Not dramatically, but enough to be measured, carefully, repeatedly. From a distance, Antarctica still looks the same. The same white surface, the same vast scale, the same quiet presence. But when observed closely, small differences begin to appear. The ice moves a little faster, certain regions thin slightly. Edges shift, not everywhere, not all at once, but in specific areas. Subtle changes that build over time. One of the reasons for this lies not only in the air above the continent, but in the ocean that surrounds it. Beneath the surface of the water, there are currents. Slow-moving layers of warmer water circulating through the depths. Most of the time, these waters remain separate from the ice. But in certain regions, they begin to reach further inward, moving beneath the edges of the ice shelves, touching parts of the ice that were once more isolated. And when this happens, the effect is gradual. The ice does not suddenly disappear. Instead, it softens. It thins it from below, a slow interaction between water and ice, often unseen but persistent. At the same time, on the surface, small pools of meltwater can begin to form during warmer periods. Not everywhere, not constantly, but occasionally. And these pools, although quiet, can influence the structure of the ice. They settle into small depressions. They spread slowly. They add weight to the surface. And over time, they can contribute to subtle changes in how the ice behaves. None of this is immediate. None of it is dramatic in the moment. But Antarctica does not respond quickly. It responds slowly. And when something changes here, it often does so over long periods, until eventually, those small changes become easier to notice. Measurements taken from satellites and long-term observations show that the mass of ice in certain parts of the continent is gradually decreasing. Not as a sudden loss, but as a steady shift, a redistribution. Ice moving from land into the ocean, changing state. Solid to liquid. And this process, while quiet, has broader effects. Because Antarctica holds an immense amount of frozen water, far more than any other place on Earth. And even small changes in such a large system can extend outward, affecting coastlines, ocean levels, and long-term patterns. But it is important to understand something here. This is not a process that unfolds all at once. It is not a single event. It is a gradual adjustment, a system responding to changing conditions in the same way that it has always responded throughout its history. The continent is not static. It never was. It has always moved, always shifted, always adapted. But now, those changes are becoming slightly more noticeable within the timescale of human observation. And that is what draws attention. Not the existence of change, but the pace at which we are beginning to see it. Still slow, still measured, but no longer entirely hidden. And as we continue to look more closely, we begin to see that some regions are more sensitive than others. Some areas respond more quickly, more noticeably. And one of those places has become especially important in understanding how this system behaves. A sensitive region of ice. As we move along the edge of Antarctica, following the slow path where the ice meets the ocean, we begin to notice something. Not every part of the continent behaves in the same way. Some regions remain very stable, unchanging for long periods of time. Others respond a little more quickly, more sensitive to the conditions around them. One of these regions lies along the coast of West Antarctica, far from most human activity, far from anything familiar. There's a vast expanse of ice stretching outward toward the sea. This is known as the Thwaites Glacier. At first glance, it does not stand out. Like much of Antarctica, it appears as part of a continuous white landscape. Wide, flat, seemingly uniform. But its scale is difficult to fully appreciate. It extends over an area comparable to an entire country. a massive body of ice slowly moving toward the ocean. Its outer edge forms a broad front where the glacier meets the water, a place where solid ice transitions into floating shelves and eventually into open sea. This boundary is not fixed, it shifts over time, sometimes gradually, sometimes in slightly more noticeable ways. And what makes this region particularly interesting is what lies beneath it. Unlike some other parts of Antarctica, where the land rises gently inland, here the terrain slopes downward, moving deeper as you travel away from the coast. This creates a kind of basin, a shape that allows ocean water to reach further beneath the ice, slowly, quietly, entering spaces that were once more isolated. And when this happens, the interaction begins from below. The water, slightly warmer than the surrounding ice, moves into contact with the underside. Not dramatically, not all at once, but persistently. Over time, this can influence the structure of the glacier. The point where the ice is anchored to the ground can gradually shift, moving inland very slowly. And as it does, the shape of the glacier adjusts. The surface stretches slightly, small fractures appear. The flow toward the ocean becomes a bit faster. Still slow, still measured, but different. Scientists observe this region carefully, not because it is collapsing or because it is unstable in a sudden sense, but because it provides insight. It shows how large ice systems respond when conditions change beneath them, how they adapt, how they adjust, how small shifts can influence movement over time. The Thwaites Glacier is not isolated, it is part of a larger network, connected to surrounding ice, to neighboring glaciers, to the broader structure of West Antarctica. So when changes occur here, they are not entirely contained. They are part of a wider pattern, a system of connections where one area can influence another. And yet, even here, everything remains slow. There is no sudden motion, no rapid transformation. Only gradual change, layer by layer, year by year. A reminder that even in the largest systems on Earth, change often begins quietly and unfolds over time. Human presence in a silent place. For most of its history, Antarctica existed without us. No footsteps, no structures, no voices carried across the wind. Only ice, sky, and time. It remained distant, not because it was hidden, but because it was difficult to reach. Surrounded by ocean, separated by powerful currents. Defined by conditions that few could endure for long. And even now, human presence there is limited, temporary, carefully maintained. Across the continent, scattered along the coasts, and in a few locations deeper inland, there are research stations. Small clusters of buildings placed on ice or on exposed rock. From a distance, they appear minimal. Simple shapes contrasting against the white. But inside them, there is activity, scientists working quietly, observing, measuring, recording. Studying the atmosphere, the ice, the ocean, the life that exists in extreme conditions. Not to change the continent, but to understand it. These stations are not permanent in the usual sense. They require constant support, supplies must be delivered. Equipment maintained, structures reinforced against wind and cold and movement of the ice itself. Even the ground beneath them is not always stable, because in many places there is no solid ground in the way we expect. Only ice slowly shifting over time. And so, human presence here adapts. Some stations are built on adjustable supports, raised above the surface, designed to move when necessary. Not fixed, but flexible. Responding to the same conditions that shape the rest of the continent. And beyond the science, there is something else. a quiet awareness that Antarctica is different. Not owned, not divided in the same way as other parts of the world. Instead, it is governed by agreement, an understanding between nations that this place should remain dedicated to research, to observation, to peaceful use. A rare example of cooperation across distance, where the focus is not on expansion but on preservation. And yet, even within that framework, there is still a sense of presence. Stations placed in specific locations, paths of access carefully planned, infrastructure slowly improving over time, not in a way that dominates the landscape, but in a way that marks it. Small points of activity within a much larger stillness. From above, these stations are barely visible, tiny, almost insignificant compared to the scale of the ice. And that scale matters, because it reminds us how small our presence really is in a place like this. Even with all our technology, all our tools, all our knowledge, we do not control Antarctica. We observe it, we adapt to it. We move within it, carefully, temporarily, aware that the conditions here are not shaped by us, but by forces that operate on much longer timescales. And in that sense, Antarctica remains what it has always been. A place that exists on its own terms, where human activity is only a brief layer, added to a much deeper story. The scale of water. It is easiest to think of Antarctica as something distant, a place far away, separate from everyday life. A continent at the edge of the map, quiet, isolated, unchanging. And in many ways, it does feel that way. But the ice of Antarctica is not only part of that distant landscape. It is part of a much larger system. A system that extends far beyond the continent itself. Because within that ice, there is water, an immense amount of water. Frozen, compressed, stored over millions of years. So much that it is difficult to imagine in ordinary terms. If all of the ice in Antarctica were to melt, the result would not be a small shift. It would be a transformation, not sudden, not immediate, but significant, gradual changes spreading outward over time. The edges of continents would adjust, coastlines would move. Some areas would experience subtle shifts, others more noticeable ones. Not as a single event, but as a long process. A rebalancing between land and ocean. But even without imagining extremes, even small changes matter. Because the ocean connects everything. Water moves, it circulates. It redistributes heat, it carries energy across vast distances. And the ice of Antarctica plays a role in that system. Not actively, not in a way we can see directly, but through its presence. Through the fact that it exists in such a large and stable form. It influences how the ocean behaves, how currents move, how temperature is distributed. It reflects sunlight, helping regulate how much energy the planet absorbs. It acts as a boundary between atmosphere and ocean and land, a quiet, stabilizing force. And when something changes within that system, the effects do not remain isolated. They extend outward. Slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, but consistently. This is what makes Antarctica unique. Not just its size, not just its isolation, but its influence. A continent that seems distant, yet is connected to everything else. And still, despite this connection, the pace remains slow. Changes unfold over time. Measured in years, in decades, in longer cycles, not in moments. And that slowness is part of what makes it difficult to fully grasp. Because we are used to things happening quickly, to visible change. Immediate results, but Antarctica operates differently. It moves, but it moves slowly. It changes, but it changes gradually. And because of that, it often feels as though nothing is happening at all, until enough time has passed for those changes to become visible. And when they do, they are not new. They are the result of processes that have been unfolding quietly for a long time. Returning to silence. If you were to stand somewhere deep within Antarctica, far from the coast, far from any station, far from any trace of human presence, you might begin to notice something. Not immediately, but slowly. At first, there is simply space. Open, wide, uninterrupted. The horizon stretches in every direction, without landmarks, without boundaries. The surface beneath your feet, smooth, pale, almost featureless. And above, a sky that feels distant, clear, still, unmoving. There is no sound of water, no movement of leaves. No distant hum of activity, only the wind. And even that is not constant. It rises, then fades, leaving behind a silence that feels complete, not empty, but full. A silence that does not ask for attention, but simply exists. In a place like this, time feels different. Not because it stops, but because it stretches. Moments become longer. Thoughts become slower. There is no urgency. Nothing pulling you forward, nothing demanding response. The ice beneath you moving so slowly that it feels still. The layers below, holding memories of air, of dust, of distant events long past. The mountains, hidden beneath kilometers of frozen weight, standing quietly in darkness. The water, sealed below, resting in stillness, everything contained. Everything at rest. And as you remain there, standing within that vast quiet, the scale of the place begins to settle in. How long it has existed, how much it has held, how little it has changed from one moment to the next. And how different that is from the world most of us move through every day. A world of movement, of sound, of constant change. Here, there is none of that. Only a slower rhythm, a deeper pace, one that does not rush and does not need to. And in that stillness there is or kumalas rita perbadas, there is something calming. Not because nothing is happening, but because everything is happening, so gradually that it allows space for rest. You do not need to follow every detail. You do not need to hold every idea. You can let them pass as slowly as the ice itself moves. Let the images fade one by one, the white horizon softening. The distant sky quietly dimming. The sense of space becoming lighter, less defined. And as that happens, there is no need to stay here. You can begin to drift away from the plateau, away from the ice, away from the cold, open silence, back toward warmth, back toward comfort, back toward a place that feels familiar. And as you leave, the continent remains unchanged, still, quiet. The ice continues its slow movement. The hidden landscapes remain below. The layers of time stay preserved beneath the surface. Nothing is lost, nothing is rushed. Everything continues at its own pace, and you do not need to follow it any further. For now, it is enough to know that it is there. A place of stillness at the edge of the world, holding its silence, holding its time and continuing quietly into the distance. You can rest. There is nothing you need to do. Nothing you need to figure out, nothing you need to hold on to. Just let the thoughts settle as gently as snow falling on ice. Slowly, softly, without effort. And as the quiet deepens, you can allow yourself to drift further. Into rest, into stillness, into sleep. Good night.